African leaders have called for higher investment in primary health care and increased local manufacturing of key medical products to combat future pandemics. Now, this as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to upend lives and economies across the world. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The outbreak of the COVID-19 and its effects on the continent dominated discussions at the highest level of the second edition of the Aswan Forum that aims at kickstarting Africa's economic recovery after the pandemic-induced slump.
This is the ideal time to study together the huge challenges that face our nations and to discuss and research the best means and tools to support our efforts to recover from the pandemic and to better rebuild in order to take our continent out of this crisis into safety.
The forum emphasized that while Africa has shown leadership in addressing the health impact of the COVID-19, the pandemic has exposed the continent's economic underbelly and also its fragile healthcare system.
The pandemic has highlighted the critical importance of increasing domestic health financing on our continent. National health systems have been the backbone of pandemic response. Tools are available to help governments not only spend more, but spend better. We must further strengthen Africa CDC to ensure its autonomy and effectiveness.
Regional leaders called for timely action to help withstand the future economic shocks, including from the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic.
The ramifications of the pandemic will indeed be far-reaching across all spheres of life, thus endangering peace and security, human capital development, and the socio-economic recovery. It is paramount that we relook at our respective national health infrastructure and health financing models. Sustainable peace and development in Africa in the post-COVID-19 era will be largely dependent on our collective commitment to implement the conventions, treaties, protocols, and agreements already adopted by our continental body, the African Union.
The rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines is expected to boost recovery, but there have been concerns that the continent is falling behind in securing the vaccinations.
I reiterate the solidarity of the United Nations with the people and governments of Africa at this time. Vaccines must be a global public good, available and affordable for everyone, everywhere. And the world urgently needs a global vaccination plan. And I'm urging the G20 to bring together countries, companies, and international organizations and financial institutions with the required power, scientific expertise, and production and financial capacities. I'm also calling on the international community to support the world's most vulnerable people and countries, from strengthening health systems to providing debt relief.
Panelists expressed optimism the pandemic will have been contained before the next forum, as the continent's economies accelerate efforts to recover from the downturn. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And to give us more perspective on the ongoing Aswan Forum, we have Ambassador Ahmed Abdel Latif, the head of the Aswan Forum Secretariat and Director General of the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution for Peacekeeping and Peace Building. He joins us live via Zoom from Cairo. Well, Ambassador, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us here on Africa Live. We certainly appreciate it. Let's dive straight into this one. The Aswan Forum's dominant topic is economic recovery and rebuilding after the pandemic. How do you see these discussions shaping the way forward for African leaders?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Indeed, the focus of the second edition of the Aswan Forum is the response to the pandemic and how can Africa recover stronger and rebuild better. And we've seen some very strong messages from African heads of states calling for strengthened African cooperation to overcome this crisis. We have seen a very strong mobilization of African leaders and the African Union in facing the health effects of the pandemic and in responding to its health effects, in seeking to ensure equitable access to vaccines for Africa. But at the same time, we need the same mobilization, we need the same cooperation to pull forward our economies, to advance African economic integration in order to be able to recover better, to create jobs, and to go forward. Whether it's in the area of trade, whether in infrastructure, whether in sustainable energy, we need to increase our investments in these key sectors and to use those investments in order to not only for economic recovery, but for sustainable recovery that creates more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable societies in Africa.
All right, Ambassador, let's shift gears and rewind a little bit. What was the impact of the first edition of the ASWAN Forum that can inform what to expect going forward?
Thank you. Actually, the first edition in December 2019 was very successful. And I think it was successful because not only it brought together a large number of heads of states and of leaders from government, private sector, and civil society in Africa, but it created a conversation that brought together peace, development, and humanitarian actors. And this is very important because usually these actors, they meet in different fora, they have separate conversations, and it was very important to bring them together in the same space. And the message that came out of it is that Africa needs to shift from crisis management to long-term sustainable peace and development with resilience and prevention at its core. And what we have seen with the pandemic and the response to it, that actually it reinforces that messages. It reinforces the need for African countries to strengthen their capacities to deal with crises, to deal with new challenges, to deal with new risks, whether they are climate, whether they are health. So the second edition will take forward further that message in the recovery to the pandemic and in rebuilding better.
All right, Ambassador Ahmed Abdel Latif, we appreciate your insights, important points that you've made there. Thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live.